Patterson was brought into the court dock at the start of the hearing, and I mean, for most of it, she cut a pretty glum figure in the court dock. But as Justice Beale started going through his sentence and just talking about how, blatant this crime was, Patterson shut her eyes and just appeared to be trying to sort of block it out as he was going through, step after step of this.
It was a timeline, wasn't it, that he really went through?
And it was a damning timeline when he put it in that context and summarised it in that way. At times, Patterson appeared to be getting a little bit emotional, but she didn't sort of shed any tears. There weren't any great waterworks, despite the judge talking about the impact that this crime had on her family and the wider community. And when it came to that critical moment to be sentenced, Erin Patterson stood up and effectively just copped it on the chin, didn't really show a great deal of emotion, and within a minute or two she was escorted out of the room.
Let's talk about who else was in the courtroom. We know that Pastor Ian Wilkinson was inside the courtroom. He spoke to the media a very short time ago. But there was a noted absence. Simon Patterson wasn't in court, Erin Patterson's estranged husband. Was that noted by you too?
Yeah, Simon Patterson wasn't seen a few weeks ago during the pre-sentence hearing either. And that was a hearing where he had the opportunity to give a victim impact statement, and instead of delivering it in person, he chose to submit a written statement which was read out on his behalf. He wasn't here today. Simon Patterson is obviously a very notable person in this case. He was the fifth person who was invited to the lunch, and as many people know, he declined. And the backstory to that has come out since the trial, that he felt that Erin Patterson had previously poisoned him and had led him to fall very, very sick. And so he pulled out of the lunch because he felt too uncomfortable. Simon Patterson did testify at the trial, but since then he hasn't been seen, willingly anyway, in public.
Should also note that those allegations that the prosecution were hoping to put forward were never tested in front of a jury, and it's not what Erin Patterson has been sentenced for today. And Erin Patterson was set to deny those allegations if they were to come to court. We haven't heard anything from Erin Patterson's defence team today, or whether there might be an appeal on foot.
We haven't, and they have about 28 days to formally lodge that appeal. But look, the courts are pretty generous, and if they miss the appeal date by a few days, that will be okay. But what the legal team will have to do if they want to appeal is they're going to have to give the Court of Appeal some pretty decent grounds to lodge this legal challenge on. You can't just say, the jury got it wrong, unless there's pretty compelling evidence that the jury was, given incorrect information or not
that there wasn't enough evidence maybe to convict her on.
Correct, or that the judge in some way made a mistake with the way he instructed the jury, or they could potentially go right back to the start, to before this trial even began. Maybe they could look at some of the material that was excluded from the trial and perhaps point that it would have been to Patterson's benefit, or perhaps they would have looked at some of the evidence that was included in the trial and said maybe this shouldn't have gone in. But look, it's very tough to say what those potential appeal grounds could be. And then once they've lodged the paperwork, the Court of Appeal has to decide whether they'll even consider it.
Right.
If they pass that hurdle, then the Court of Appeal would hear an appeal, and if they are successful on that front, a retrial could be ordered. So there's so many steps.
And a retrial in this case, how likely would you think that is, given the huge amount of attention this case has had? What do you think?
Well, I mean, a potential retrial would be determined on the legal grounds. Justice Beale made a comment a few weeks ago saying that he thought it was unlikely that an appeal would be allowed. And I guess that probably highlights the fact that he thought he ran his trial well. But as for a potential retrial in the unlikely event that it happens, under Victorian, the way it's sort of run here in Victoria, it would be put before another jury. You'd imagine there'd have to be a significant amount of time that would have to pass, given all the attention on the case. But as the judge said, he believes it's unlikely that that would ever happen.
And just lastly, because I know you've probably got to run off and record a pod, but I wanted to ask your reflections on this case. You're an experienced court reporter. You've covered many cases. Your reflections on the scale of this case.
I think in terms of public attention on it, it's one of the biggest cases in the last 50 years. I've spoken to many experienced lawyers and reporters with decades more time under their belt than I've had, and they say this is the biggest thing that they've seen since the Lindy Chamberlain case in terms of the public attention. So it could be decades until we see a case with this much attention on it. I think there will be many people that will question whether that attention was warranted, and I think that's a discussion that is worth having. And perhaps it's an uncomfortable discussion as well for members of the media, including us, who have inevitably fueled what has been a frenzied interest in this case since the deaths of those lunch guests 2 years ago.